All right. So let me get this sorted out here. We'll get started in just a moment. This in place. Okay, so we're going to get started, and I'm going to look at my notes about the last week or so, and then we'll cover the week's events. Somebody's already populated. Okay, so it's been quite a week, hasn't it? I thought last week with the leaks. Hello, welcome. I thought last week with the leaks that we had that like they can't get crazier than this, but then it got crazier than this. So it's pretty amazing. I'm going to go through the week's events. If you have any questions immediately, like somebody just popped in, where are you from? Who is it? Where are you from? Hi. Um, what I do here is I try to answer whatever questions that you have first, and when you don't have questions or there's a lull, I'll just keep going over the week's events. So we're covering both the week's events and answering your questions. And it's a good way to wrap up the week, I found. And yeah, so that's what we'll do. So I'm going to roll back the clock. It's Saturday, April 22nd. So if we roll back the clock 1 week, it would well, let's go to the Friday the 14th. That's where I'll start. And so Bakhmut was under attack, and it hasn't fallen yet. And I think I was asked last week. It might have been the week before. Hello, Yuri. It's good to see you. Hello, Dave from Australia. Nice to see you as well. Uh, if I look back a week earlier, um, it wasn't quite as bad, and it's just been getting slightly worse and slightly worse and slightly worse. But I keep getting asked, well, is Bakhmut about to fall? Well, if you read RT, it's fallen 37 times already, and or was about to, like on the precipice of falling 37 times, and so it's still held out. Yesterday there was even a road was cut, at least temporarily, and this was from reporting from Ukraine, and they got it back under control, but they have multiple paths to get in and out, so that they're thinking through that. Okay, so last Friday, Friday the 14th, there was this leak, that we were talking about. There was talking about the rift between the UN and and what we think we know about the leak. This might not be true, but I think it is, and so I'll stand corrected if I'm off. But it looks like the connection between Jake Teixeira, who originally put stuff out because he's stupid, was then picked up later on by Donbass. I don't know how to pronounce that. The Shuvka, whatever. It's a Donbass girl. I can probably spell it better than I can. Whatever. At any rate, and then she, it appears, might have been the one that doctored that 7-to-1 figure. Now, that 7-to-1 figure was absolutely fascinating because it was picked up by, and I showed you this in a video with Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter and Judge Napolitano talking about it. Well, 7-to-1, that's unsustainable. I talked about that in my video, like that you're using doctored stuff. Now, I thought it was, Russian trolls. Well, it was a Russian troll. Okay. Donbass Davushka. I said it. Ha. Ironically, I'm wearing a shirt that says I'm silently correcting your grammar and I'm slaughtering the pronunciation. Donbass just I'm not even going to try to say it again. Sarah Bills. It looks like she might have been the one that actually doctored that. But then it was picked up on Tucker Carlson, and then it was picked up by Robert Kennedy Jr. Well, not Junior, Junior. Robert Kennedy's son, from yeah, I guess it's Junior. Robert Kennedy Jr. is announced a presidential bid in the United States, and he was talking about that 7-to-1 figure. And okay, yeah, I got it once. Thank you. Somebody commented, "You got it once. I heard you." Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, so let's see what else. So on part of that was China said it won't supply any weapons to the party in conflict. China and India are buying up Russian oil at a quick pace, and that is now Moscow is selling more oil to China and India than they were selling before the war. So there we are. Okay, so that was Friday. Yeah, that and Tucker Carlson's leaked narrative with the 7-1 was on Friday as well. Okay, so then Saturday, the 1 week ago today, is what I'll talk about next. Let me look at the questions. Takio wow, Fukanaga. Okay. Hi, Dr. Gerdes. Thank you for your commitment to help Ukrainians by spreading information. Yes, I'm Ukrainian, though with Japanese authors' names as a username. Okay, well, that's fine. I just had to work my way through your name as well. Greetings from Germany. Oh, I, I, let me see. Guten Tag, I guess, because you're a little ahead of me. So, Guten Tag. Old fogey, if you don't succeed, try again. That's right. Keep going at it. Legane Legions. Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay, so last Saturday, what was going on in the news? Okay, Mitchell said, greetings. The case of Donbass Devushka, got it again, is interesting. I heard it by Jake Bro. Yeah, Jake, I mean, so here's the thing. I read a dozen or so articles daily, right? And I have done this. I've been, if I were to guess or average, I've probably spent about 2 hours a day here. This is like a little bit much, right? But so I'm reading like, and I'm reading legitimate news sources, and I heard this first from Jake because it was so small in the legitimate news sources, and that's where I got it from first, and then I started tracking things down. And yeah, Jake's done a great job with this, and he deserves credit. And NAFO cracking it was pretty significant. Okay, let's see. You heard it from Jake Bro. Sage, good afternoon from Wales, UK. Welcome, Steve Osborne. Don't forget that the reason that India and China are going up the hill is because they can refine it into other products. That's right. And India was trying to sell it. That's a good point. India was trying to refine it and then sell it back to Europe. So they're trying to close that loophole. I don't know if they have already, but that's what was going on. Just want to add that in your videos, you've talked about almost all bloggers that I also watch on my own, and I totally approve of your selection. Right. So Steve Osborne, who I just talked about, was part of this restraining process. And I got a small handful of people that I trusted that were here on my channel for a long time. Steve would correct me every time I was wrong, and then a few times when I wasn't. But he's a good guy, and so I emphatically trust his judgment on this. And Steve and 5 or so other people. So we crowdsourced this in a live stream about a month and a half ago, and then we just kind of refined it. And so by yesterday, I had a really all the light green were streamed, validated by others. And so I'm like, okay, the light green I'm pretty confident in, but the dark green was like, these are the ones. If I had to say, like, here are the top 20 to look at, these are the ones that I would point to. And it was painful because there were a couple on there that I wanted to add to that. And what are you going to do? So, but all of those are good sources, and I'm glad that they're out there. I think I'm going to do another one of these Q&A kind of things where we'll look through Twitter sources. So start bookmarking Twitter sources, because we want, and that's going to be a little bit harder. So each step removed from a valid, like, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Times of London, BBC, each step removed from like journalistic whatever is more dangerous. But I wouldn't suggest these guys on YouTube if, like, when I say more dangerous, I mean more dangerous to be away from the facts. Like, when you have journalistic integrity and standards like the major newspapers have, and Russian trolls will say, well, you're just spreading propaganda. Okay, well, so who are your sources, right? I would put myself on with the journalistic integrity sources as opposed to something else. And I'm very quick to say that that's how you should be processing this. And you should not be just relying. Anybody can say anything on YouTube, right? Which is why I try to validate my sources. So, okay, at any rate, yeah, I got off on a little rabbit trail here, and people popped up and started saying things. So don't support rats. Said, wait, India's refining and selling to Europe doesn't mean the Russians make money on refined products over the price cap. It means India and China makes the money. Yeah, but they're buying it from Russia, which is, yeah, I don't know that Okay, so one of the things that they're doing right now with the weapons that are flowing into Ukraine and the products that are flowing into Ukraine is that they're trying to make sure that there's a non-Russian Russia's not part of the supply chain, and that's a good thing. You don't want to encourage them to be gaining more in the process of destroying Ukraine. Otherwise, I'm a free marketeer, and I would be like, sure, buy from whoever, but not right now. That's not a kind of cool thing to be doing. So Steve Osborne, oi oi oi. I don't know what that means. Canuckson, hello from Ottawa, Canada. Yuri says there is one more YouTuber that posts something about Ukraine. Adam something. He seems, yeah. There's a bunch of more that and I put a pinned link below on that last video that I did. I put a pinned link and said, look, if you want to add to the list, put that on here, and that went to the original list that we had streamed, because with the spreadsheet that I put out was a copy and paste of what we originally had, and so it wasn't I didn't want to have more added to and add confusion when people did this, because I got a dozen or so, maybe more, that were just plain Russian propaganda from the first one. I don't know. Maybe Steve remembers how many there were that were red, and we're like, we're not putting that out there. And I have mixed emotions. Tell me what you think. I was thinking about potentially creating a list of like bad, on the other side, but I don't know if that's a good idea. Okay. Discovering sources that are truthful isn't difficult. That's true if you have some integrity and you're really trying to triangulate. Good evening, Sizet Sarin. Legati Legion says Russian oil is the most expensive off-rig drills per barrel to get oil up because permafrost, so they need to keep the pipes open. They don't earn much on it with the huge discounts. That's probably true, but their budget is a third of their budget comes from oil and gas, and so they're very dependent on making this work, and so they're trying to work out a way to make it work. Steve Osborne, sorry, that was a reply to Koala Bear. I gotcha. Okay, oi oi oi. Rabbit High, observing propagandists channel is almost always hilarious or horrific as watching Russian TV channel. Yeah, watching Russian TV hurts my head, but I do it anyway because I want to understand what's going on. So I watch RT when I have the mental capacity to do it, and yeah, you get an interesting perspective of how they think. It's not so that they'll persuade me with arguments, but so I can see how they're trying to spin things, and that tells me a lot about what's actually going on. Tony Wilson says, hello, what do you think of the leadership and management qualities displayed by the head of the IAEA? I don't know enough to be able to speak intelligently to it. I think they're trying to do a job, but I think it's such a huge task that they have that I don't know that if you replace them with somebody else, I don't know that they're going to do much better just because of the task. So I'm going to pass on that and intentionally be opaque. I just can't say anything to it. Old Fogey says, I look for the truth about a situation, whether good or bad. Stop the bias in reporting. So we all are biased, and it would be better that we acknowledge our bias than we claim that we're not. And if we just acknowledge it, we can say, like, I have a conservative background, and so I see things through a different world. Now, but this is good because if you hear my perspective, and then you hear somebody with a liberal black background, and you hear somebody with that background and this background and that background, and you triangulate on those pictures, you'll get to somewhere resembling truth, or at least you'll be able to see certain nuances that you wouldn't otherwise see. So I don't mind that people have bias. Just tell us what the bias is, and then we can see that that's whatever. Yeah, Cinnamon, I bias 100% or 110% Ukrainian victory. Yeah, that's my bias too. Because people, like the trolls, will say, "Well, you're not biased, or you're biased. You're just spouting this pro-Ukraine propaganda. It's the same as Russian propaganda." No, it's not the same as Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda, RT and such, Russian state media just lies and lies and lies. Like you'll see something happen, Western journalists cover it, like Bucha, right? Western journalists cover it, it's pretty clear, and then they'll lie about it, like as if nobody's covering it. Now that might work in Russia, but for the rest of us, we're like, we know you're lying. Like Solzhenitsyn had this fascinating comment in the Gulag archipelago. He said, "We know they're lying. They know they're lying. We know that they know that they're lying. They know that we know that they know that we know that they're lying, and yet they still lie." I mean, and that's really what's happening with Russian propaganda. Okay, so one more comment, and then I'm going to switch back over to what events from last week. One YouTuber, this is Steve Osborne, one YouTuber, but I do watch, is actually based in Belarus. Although he has perhaps a Russian viewpoint, he seems to be quite accurate. What what Ukraine war map? Okay, yeah, and so you raise a really good point. Even if I don't necessarily agree with them, I can learn from them, but you have to be judicious about the sources. So that's why we put out the first list that we put out, and we may very well go through the Twitter list. Okay, last Saturday, what was going on? Poland suspended food imports from Ukraine. This was big, right? So what happened was the law of unintended consequences, where Europe was feeling bad for Ukraine, can't get their food off the market, and so or through the straits in Turkey, and so they let it pass through Poland, but some of it just stopped. And okay, the intent was to keep going, but essentially what happened was that Ukraine was inadvertently, accidentally probably, because of the tax duties not being there, undercutting the Polish farmers. And so they were essentially dumping their food on the Polish market, which consumers like, but Polish farmers, that could run them out of business. So, but not just Poland, but other countries all stopped buying or allowing food imports from Ukraine. One way of potentially fixing this is for example, the U.S. USAID to buy up a bunch of Ukrainian food and make sure it gets exported to other places in the world, Africa and other places where it's really desperately needed. But you also have to be sure not to have unintended consequences there, displacing their farmers or whatever. So you just got to do this judiciously. The new conscript law in Russia. Um, I think this came out on Saturday, and later on in the week it was signed. It was signed in little time at all. So the conscript law, or this, it might have been signed on Saturday. I'm not exactly sure, but it's been signed by Putin, and it was just pushed through the Duma really quickly. So this has electronic conscription, and what I mean by that is, so they can like send them an email or some equivalent or text, and then you have to show up. And so now you're not going to have mass mobilization where they have to close the borders or people flee or something. People, if you're a 20-year-old male in Russia, you should be very nervous right now that you're going to be backfill for the slaughter. Leaked intel: the Russian officials tried to use Putin's cancer to overthrow what was going on in the war. And this was from Newsweek, or no, this wasn't Newsweek. This was the Jerusalem Post, and that's really interesting. So that's one, you don't hear a lot about Putin having cancer, and two, that they actually were, obviously there's infighting, but there's you know you just don't think about it. So if you're an oligarch, you're very unhappy with Putin. The people are not going to rise up and overthrow him, but danger comes from the oligarchs and those that are supporting him in the next tier. So Vlad Vexler does a great bit where he was talking about, and I don't remember how far back this was, a few months back, maybe before Christmas. He's talking about the the Tsar at the top, and then his next little tier. I can't remember what the tier of those that support him are, and then kind of the peasants and serfs at the bottom. But that tier that supports him in Russia currently is really where the action is going to be for any kind of movement. I don't know that they actually will do anything, but certainly the serfs in Russia. This shout out to Ozzy Bugga. Shout out to Ozzy for pointing out the difference between serfs and Cossacks. The serfs aren't going to do anything. Okay, and then last thing, Newsweek also provided some significant coverage of leaked documents on last Saturday. Let me go to the comments that were here because there were quite a few that showed up since. Let's see. Cinnamon said, Steve-O, I listened to him from early on Balance. Greetings from Romania. Greetings, Romania. Stephen Seif said, U.S., New Jersey, the pledge versus delivery military equipment of Delta. Only about 60% of the pledged MBTs have been received. The IVFs/APCs delivered are greater than pledged, MRAPs included. Okay. Where in Jersey you're from? I'm from Jersey. Cinnamon, war in Ukraine. Yes, I don't know what you're exactly saying. Cheryl's here. Shirley says, yes, I politely mentioned Operator Starsky wasn't on the list. Yeah, he was on the list. He's on um, 44, row 44. In fact, he agreed to be interviewed. So I'm like a kid in a candy store now. This is absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to get to talk to him because he popped up and commented on one of yes either yesterday or the day before's video, and so I'm going to be interviewing Starsky when we can coordinate it. Ozzy said, Steve Osborne, I think I know what you mean, had to stop watching him when during Lucid Chance when he called Ukrainian forces to surrender. He's a GRU puppet, but subtle at it. Yeah, so again, you got to strain those sources. Tammy G and the Bakers, Russia has refrained from using the DPU tank rounds. How do you think the world will react when Ukrainian soldiers start dying from DPU poisoning after inhaling DPU? Wow. So if they do something, let's just expand to chemical warfare. Let's not go to nuclear. I don't see a scenario with nuclear warfare at this point, and that's because there's really no win. But chemical, I think, may very well, you might get some condemnation, but it won't be the same outrage as you'll get from chemical warfare. Like, I mean, look what happened. There was outrage for a little bit, and then a tamp down in Syria with chemical warfare. So, okay, at any rate, Cheryl said, I got a shout out from Mercado Media. I watch everything. Yeah, I watched that too. And he was talking about like, yeah, hey, this guy's a real professor. Look, he's got stuff up on the wall, and I don't have anything. Like he was pointing at the diplomas in the wall in my office. But there's no see. This is why you triangulate, because there's no way that I could do what he does. Like so, he has an insight from where he sits, having actual military experience that I don't have. That he can talk to things that I can't talk to, and vice versa. We'll see different things. This is why you triangulate on multiple sources. So yeah, that was fun to see. Um, let's see. Don't support rats. I don't particularly think mobilization ever stopped. You're right. I don't think it stopped either. They just stopped doing it in mass because their training facilities were full. Now it's done in smaller batches. I don't think it's that necessarily. I mean, you could be right. It could be that their training facilities were full, and that's what caused it. But I think they know that their attrition rate is very high, and they have to keep reprocessing. So, and they don't want to have another million people flee because that's a bad look. But if you're a 20-year-old in Russia and you're watching this, get out. Australia, the price of flour went up 2 months after the start of the war. I bet it won't come down again anytime soon. Yeah, there's inflation all over, and it's exacerbated by the war, but it's pretty crushing in Russia from everything I understand. Okay, number 44, Operator Starsky. Shirley says, what do you think of the Wagner talking about killing civilians and kids, executing POWs and their own guys? Yeah, so I'm on Saturday here in this, and one of the days here was talking about Wagner. I think it was trying to remember which day it was, but a Wagner boss talking about, or Wagner commander talking about being ordered to kill children. Look, if you don't follow their orders, they kill you, and that's and so they feel fine to tell them, kill everybody, doesn't matter who, including children. And that's the way that these evil monsters actually think. And like there's no moral compass guiding or keeping them from doing anything otherwise. I think back to Operation Red Wing with the U.S. Navy SEALs. The reason that Operation Red Wing went so wrong is because Americans had a moral quandary when a little sheep herding boy, stumbled upon these Navy SEALs, and they were, debating about themselves, like, okay, he's gonna tell on us if we let him go. We can't kill him, can't let him go. Like Wagner would have had no problem, no moral compunction, just killing the child. Where these American soldiers were like, we can't do that. And I think there were 6 of them. There was only one that survived after the Taliban came after him. So I mean, they're just in a whole different moral place in Wagner. Okay. Anyway, what role does Moldova play in the Ukrainian conflict? Hopefully none. They might, and I was having this debate yesterday about like, Well, why are we even doing this in Ukraine? I mean, it's not our war, right? Okay, what's your alternative? And that this is how I like to frame this when people say, well, we're spending all this money. We're not spending soldiers. Okay, we're not. And hopefully we won't have to. But yeah, we shouldn't be involved. Okay, but if we don't, what happens? What happens next if we don't get involved now? Like you can stop this while it's a molehill before it becomes a mountain. I even explained, like I have two sons. If this was not handled appropriately, it could become World War III, and my sons could be sucked into it, like two teenage sons that would be of almost military draft age. And you just don't want to go down that path. So, well, we shouldn't be involved. We don't want World War III. I don't want World War III. That's precisely the point. Okay, so what role does Moldova play? I think had Putin gotten his way, he would have been in Odessa in the first couple of weeks and spread across Ukraine, and within a month, maybe controlling Ukraine. I'm very sure that Moldova would have been next, and it would have embroiled more than just Ukraine. So Zelensky's absolutely right when he's saying they're fighting there for Europe and the world, and that's exactly right. They're fighting there. So probably only the military can make a difference. I'm not exactly sure, but it's got to be decided on the battlefield. Starsky knows better than all what's happening in Ukraine. He'll have an amazing vantage point. Um, I think I skipped something accidentally. Wow, there's a lot of comments here, so I'm going to just keep going on comments. Where are we? Starsky's a great example of leadership. I believe he is a captain now. Fantastic operator, Starsky. Steve Osborne says I'm very cynical. No, not you, Steve. Uh, so I'm careful. Steve likes to correct me and says, the messages I get from Steve are like, yeah, Professor, you missed this. Let me tell you about this. And then I have to argue back with him. Sometimes he's just purely right, but sometimes I would just say, no, I'm sticking to my guns. Anyway, so Steve says, I'm very cynical. I'm so very careful with anything anyone says. I'm afraid also applies to some of the people in green on the professor's list. That's correct, but you can learn, and they're reasonably safe in a sense that you can learn. The very dark shaded, I'm like, look, full approval. The green shaded, I'm like, look, you learn these are good. Like, so part of the debate was Denis Davdov and Konstantin, and I have no problem listening to either of them. Now, are either everybody's cup of tea? No, for many reasons, right? Like some people just don't like. Well, yeah, I heard the first charge that I heard with Constantine was like, why doesn't he just protest instead of get out of the country? Like that's a hard position to be in. Um, and well, he doesn't get back to me, and he's not really doing much to help. Look, just for either of them, right? Just doing what they're doing provides insight that's helping inform us, that's helping us spread stuff. Like we're trying to all be part of this spreading of this, keeping people aware of what's going on. So I'm not hard on him, and I can learn things from Constantine. He lived in the United States, so he has a mental bridge between the West and how Russia thinks, and he can translate some of that. Would I prefer that he acts like another YouTuber? That's irrelevant. It's not my point. It's not my place to tell him how to do it. It's like when people want to say, "Well, don't talk about anything political." It's my channel. If I think that it's something important that you need to understand, I'm going to tell you something important that I think you need to understand, and it's because I care about this subject, and this is the way that I do it. So just start your own channel and do it the way that you want to do it, and add to your voice or add your voice to the mix. That's great. But okay, at any rate, I'm belaboring that now. Shirley, yes, I love him. I'm sorry I didn't see it. Ozzy says Steve Osborne at the start of the round. This round of the invasion, I was watching anything for info. I whittled the pack down to stopping watching anyone who actively lied. That's a good plan. Stop watching anyone who actively lied, unless you're watching it to see what they're lying about. Very often in Russian propaganda, if whatever they're lying about is like what they're doing, it's a very weird thing, and it's not foolproof. But like if they say the Ukrainians are, sending missiles at these innocent civilians at a train station, that's what they're doing. It's unbelievably bizarre. It's like this weird mirroring effect, and I don't know how to describe it other than that. Cinnamon says, Chris, YouTube channel doesn't post often enough, though. Have you watched Andrew Perpetua? 100 years of non-evolution. Wagner isn't banal, but it is evil. It is evil. It really is evil. By the way, I was watching a news report last night in the Sudan. Okay, so what Ukraine is the focal point of what Russia's doing in the world, but Russia's doing other stuff in the world, like in Syria, Sudan. In Sudan, Wagner's involved in Sudan, and there was just an alert for Americans to get out of Sudan, and the State Department put that alert out. Um, the one side is there's one general that's on one side and another general propped up by Wagner on the other. So like they spread their evil all over. Okay. Richie MC said, was watching your Scott Ritter video. What's the next video you're working on? I think I want to talk about how Putin needs Nazis. He needs Nazis in order to make his case, or everything else falls apart. So that's what I've been noodling on for the last week, but we've been overcome by other events like leaks and that kind of thing. So I've been thinking about this for a while. So I'm looking forward to creating that video. I'll look up. Cheryl Waitley says, I really wonder if Wagner killed those teen boys who stayed behind with their Orthodox. I don't know. Don't support or don't support rats. I would rather spend $8 a day than have my son deployed. I don't know what we're talking about with the $8 a day. Russian Orthodox. Let's see. Shirley says, even though the guy on the video says Wagner's after him now and asking for him to help look after his son if anything happens to him. Raised in Union. Steven, you are freaking kidding me. That's where I'm from. Holy crap. What up, fighting farmer? Okay, so I know that. So that tells you this is the most ridiculous thing. This has nothing to do with Ukraine, but I'm going to say that my hometown, Union, New Jersey, 20 miles outside of New York City, right? From Route 22, you could have seen the Twin Towers on a clear, like if it was perfectly clear, the Twin Towers that got destroyed in 2001 from a part of Route 22, you could have seen it if you were just angled just right. So in Union, 20 miles outside New York City, our mascot was called the Union High School Fighting Farmers. Actually, fighting farmers, like no G. Like somehow we thought that was slang was cool. Farmers, yeah, seriously, farmers. 20 miles outside New York. Go figure. Okay. Anyway, welcome, Stephen. Does the U.S. live up? Where is it? Oh, something just popped up here. Wow, there's a lot of comments here. I got to get caught up. Does the U.S. live up to the Budapest Memorandum? No. So here's the problem. The Budapest Memorandum was the U.S., UK, and Russia that were all supposed to be guaranteeing the borders. Russia invaded, and then it was the U.S. slow-walked through many years, like 2014. Where was the U.S. and UK? Like, so we encouraged Putin inadvertently to do what he did in 2022 by not supporting it in 2014. But we're there now. It's a little late. Okay. Surely Wagner has been doing this for years. I heard them before the Ukraine. Yeah, Wagner's just been bad for a long time. Richie, Moldova needs to be annexed by Romania until the war is over. Yeah, I can't speak to that. I think there's a lot more moving parts there than I think we're thinking of. Tony Wilson, I would rather spend $10 a day than have a nuclear exchange once Russia reaches Poland. Yeah. Oh, I see. So you're saying you're spending in your tax dollars. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get it now. Yeah. I mean, so if you don't do anything, you let it fester and then it becomes a bigger thing. So that's why you need to deal with it. Old Fogey says European wars, World War I, World War II. Does World War III need to happen to get people to understand the seriousness of the situation? Gosh, I hope not. I really hope not. As someone who supports the territorial rights of Ukraine, you see no problem in Moldova being annexed. You're speaking to someone else, not me. I'm not saying do that. 500 Wagner and Syrian army attacked a position with Kurds and a small squad of U.S. soldiers. Didn't end well for Wagner. And the Kurds are actually some of the fiercest fighters in the region. I love the Kurds. I think Iraq should have been broken. Somebody's not going to like me for this, but too bad. I think Iraq should have been sliced off when given to the Kurd, like the north third should have been Kurdistan from that point forward. The Kurds uh, are an awesome ally. It also unnerves Erdogan because he hates the Kurds, and they're a minority group within Iraq that spilled over a little bit into the Turkish border that have had no homeland because when the lines were drawn, it was drawn up largely by the British, who didn't factor them in. Okay. Tammy G and the Bakers. I'm pretty sure Ukraine is going to try to do a sea invasion of Crimea. U.S. just connected Russia back to SWIFT to save the grain deal, and Ukraine needs the grain corridor for the naval op on Crimea. Uh, you might know something I don't know. I'm not in the game of trying to predict military movements, like what's going to happen where. It's not my expertise. It's not something that I can really speak to authoritatively. So maybe you know something I don't know. Constantine is protesting hard as heck for a Russian. No, that's a good point. Don't support rats. He by doing what he's doing, he knows so think about it. He can't really go back. So he's actually taking quite a stand for a Russian who are generally apolitical. And if you haven't gone back, go back like two days where I was talking about that first video about the difference between Anders Puck Nielsen and Vlad's views of this. It's hard to get past that just beaten down mentality. Vlad doesn't think they're going to get there. Anders says as they rise, they're going to have to go into these three buckets. But so he's actually doing something. And so I give him credit for that. But even more to the point, I think he's doing something that's helping us understand, and that's a valuable service. So I'm not hard on him for that reason. Santa's Mocha. Hi, Professor. Constantine inside Russia just compared oppressive North Korean laws to some of the things Russians were doing and prosecuted in just a day. Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, do I feel that they're on the same trajectory as North Korea? Since the beginning of this war, Putin has really doubled down on authoritarian behavior, ramming things through the Duma with very little check. There's the appearance of democracy, but it's really not democracy. He's an authoritarian with a rubber stamp legislature, and that's not how it's supposed to work. And it's bad. So what's his name that just got 25 years for protesting? You've got 20. So here's how backwards things are in Russia and Ukraine, right? In the first couple of hours of the war, I don't remember, it was within the first few days, I saw this lady and being interviewed on the news, and she's huddled in a underground railroad subway station for safety, and she's saying, if I ran through a stop sign and I hit another car and it was my fault, I go to jail. If I'm just being delinquent, I go to jail for years. Putin's running roughshod over the country, killing people with impunity, and nothing's happening to him, right? Think about that. Now, think about 25 years for protesting against the government, for saying things that are against the war or against Putin. So it's taken as treason. That's just, it's all out of proportion from what it should be. He should have we have the free speech. We're saying the same stuff now. Okay. Steve Osborne says, MC, I'm not sure where you got the idea that Moldova has 31 MiGs from. Okay, I can't speak to that. So Denis Davidov is helping the army by raising money for them. Yeah, he's helping in a number of ways, but how he plays that is up to him. ATP, howdy. What's up, Johnny? How you doing? Johnny, I gave you a shout out, by the way, yesterday in the, you were part of the YouTubers that I was highlighting, and I showed your Donbass Devushka segment. So good work with that. By the way, if you're not familiar with ATP Geopolitics, I want to heartily recommend that you go watch Johnny and his analysis. He does a great job, and I stand behind that. Cheryl Waitley, Constantine on Inside Russia is interesting. I can sometimes see the influence of Russian propaganda in what he says. He fell into Russophobia victimhood trap recently. Okay, let's say he did. For the rest of it, I got a lot of insight. So take him with a grain of salt if you need to, but I still think he's valuable. Shirley says History Legends has went full simp for Wagner. Okay, I can't tell you about History Legends. I don't watch History Legends. Um, oh, where we go? Man, that skipped a lot. You have a lot of comments here. This is great. Ozzy says, Shirley, that was my thought. I'm an expat and I have, I don't know what you just said here. Too well to be infamous for him to be, okay. Give Syria to the Kurds. Yeah, okay, I can get behind that. Thoughts on whether Prigozhin could be picked up out of the country and dropped off at my parents' homeland in the Netherlands. I love the turn of phrase there. Very, very nice. I don't know what's going to happen with Prigozhin. I mean, he's a survivor, but he's nowhere near the battlefront. But then he'll pose with the guys once it's all clear. He's not going to put himself in any way where he could be in any great danger. Stephen Sipe, Ukrainians have 200,000 to 400,000 troops by Russian estimates. This is 40 to 80 brigades worth of troops. Only 9 brigades by Soviet scheme have been created from NATO equipment, missing 31 brigades. Okay, so both sides are working the numbers as much as we can, and it's much more opaque on the Russian side because you can't get true numbers about Russian finance. You can't get true numbers about Russian casualties. You can't get true numbers about Russian, like how many soldiers they actually have. That's very, very hard. So I'm not sure what to say about, side for side. Prigozhin isn't leading Wagner, right? He's a figurehead. He is the face of the organization. He's not really like, follow me, guys, or go up there because I'm sending you. That it's not. I'm trying to. It's almost like a Hollywood actor playing a role. It's something more like that. There's another well-respected Russian commander who's actually leading Wagner. And again, Wagner is really two components. There's the mercenaries that have been there for a while that were actually reasonably tough. And then there's like the prisoners that get sent to the slaughter. So professors, the military education outside Ukraine mostly train the trainer program to improve the heroes in Ukraine, or will the training stay outsourced for security reasons? Can't speak to that. That's not within my understanding or my expertise. And if I don't know something, I admit my ignorance. So I'm going to admit my ignorance. Prigozhin is something like a very smart troll, trolling entire countries. Currently, that's the U.S. There's something that strikes me right about that analysis, that he is like a troll. I went over this thing about him being schizophrenic last week, which is now shame. So I tell you, read legitimate sources, watch these legitimate kind of characters as they're straining things. So if you watch Jake Bro or you watch Johnny Pierce or something along these lines, what you're going to see is a pretty good analysis. But even the newspapers that we depend on sometimes fail. And I showed you that with Prigozhin's statement a week ago, and then how it was covered in the Wall Street, not the Wall Street Journal, in Radio Free Europe. And I'm trying to remember what else it was. It was like Radio Free Europe and the BBC or Times, or I don't know, Guardian. I don't remember what it was, but like legitimate papers. Prigozhin surrendering. It was this time last week. I was sitting in a park on Saturday, and I'm reading this. I'm like, Prigozhin says, be done with it now. That doesn't sound like him, because everything else that I know about him tells me that. So you have implicit and you have explicit knowledge. Like explicit knowledge is what you're able to talk about and explain. And then there's this implicit knowledge, means like I understand something, but I don't even know that I understand why I understand it. I just understand it. It's almost like riding a bicycle. It would be hard for you to describe in full detail everything that your body had to do in riding a bicycle, but you know how to do it. And you could say, yeah, get on and pedal, but I mean all the body movements, and then your left tibula has to do, I don't even know where a tibula is. I know it's a bone somewhere, but you understand what I'm saying? If you had to describe all the movements and it's hard to do that. So yeah, it just didn't sound right. And when I went back to the original source, and this is why you go to the original source, I read the whole thing and I'm like, that's not what they were saying at all. And so he was actually saying the opposite, but it was some lazy journalist that probably had to make a deadline, put something out, and now has egg on their face. Okay, Constantine, give good feel. Good update, feel, and historical reference. Cheryl Waitley says, I'm hearing some voices say that there needs to be a way back from sanctions with proof of good behavior. Yeah, so the way back from sanctions is end the war, provide reparations, and then you get to be part of the community again after a certain period of time when you prove that you're not going to be doing this, and but you have to have some penalties first. It's like you can't reward this, or you get. There's a great statement by Henry Cloud. He's a psychologist. Said you get what you tolerate. Like, think about that. You get what you tolerate. Whatever you tolerate, you're getting that. You tolerate bad behavior, you get that. You tolerate worse behavior, you get that. And that's what's happening with Putin. Okay, Tammy G and the Bakers, Stephen Seif, and most of them are infantry trained in Ukraine, and NATO only trains the mechanized and high-tech forces. You know more than I do. Santos Mocha, just roughly, Moldova and Romania have their internal and cultural differences, hence they won't merge anytime soon. I don't think there was ever any plan for them to merge. This is our speculation. Why do some Russians believe Poland is going to take some of Ukraine or split it? Okay, I see this trope in RT all the time. Poland. I saw Medvedev put this out in Telegram about 6 months ago or something. This is what Ukraine will look like. And there was this little tiny slice of Ukraine that's called Ukraine that was around Kyiv, and the whole right half of the country was taken by Russia, and the northwest was taken by Poland, and the southwest was taken by Romania, I think. And like, there was bad blood between these countries for many years historically, but okay, and that's not like it is now. And Poland, to their credit, has been very, very kind to Ukraine but that's because they remember what it was like under the Soviets. This is why Lithuania is like so full-throatedly behind Ukraine as well, because they remember what it was like under the Soviets. And they don't want to go back there. Okay. Wow. All I have to do is remember and wait, and time will prove my predictions. Stephen Seif says, I did submit my idea for post-invasion Afghanistan and also Iraq. My Iraq solution was 5 separate states, 2 city-states, a federal format, each in a colonial rule. That probably would have worked better, but what we did was mismanage it. And again, it's easy to criticize from where I sit, but we've mismanaged it. And I think we mismanage a lot of these kind of things because we don't understand the cultural context well enough to understand what's going on. Like we didn't even understand when Saddam was saber rattling about weapons of mass destruction. He was really talking to Iran, and kind of got caught like, weapons of mass destruction. You have what? and the U.S. wasn't going to tolerate the potential threat, and then and so everything went very badly. But we just don't understand the cultural context well enough to understand it. Like, yeah, I'm not going to belabor that. I was going to give you other historical examples, but let's keep going. Bogut says, what's going to be interesting for me is what's going to happen to the east of Moscow if and when Ukraine takes back Crimea. So if you're talking about like other parts of the country being, deciding they want to leave Russia or something, I think it's going to be hard for the West to say, no, we're occupied. The West is going to be like, oh, we're occupied with Ukraine. I mean, if there's a revolt over there, that's, let the people vote how they want. Or if you're talking about China taking something, if China wants to take Taiwan, they're in for a real fight. If China wants to take part of Russia, I think we're like, oh, we got what's going on over here. I hope China has learned the lesson of Ukraine and is a lot less antsy, and that's a second order effect of what's going on in Ukraine. That hopefully that'll tamp that down. Okay, Tammy G and the Bakers, you have no idea what you're talking about, zero clue. Imperior Danny said that to Tammy G. Okay, please be nice to each other. I'm going to skip that next comment because we're not going to talk about fighting. Takio Fugan, I can't pronounce your name. By the way, what's with Steven Seagal? How he turned into a Russian simp? Okay, Seagal is a fascinating figure. I was in Aikido for a number of years. I have a brown belt in Aikido, and I used to like Seagal. He's an interesting figure, but somehow over the last few years, he just kind of has this like man crush on Putin that I just can't understand. And he's gotten a little bit weirder as he's aged as well. Like he was a lot cooler when he was in his 30s and 40s, and now he's like old and gross and I don't know. I don't know, but he really does have this weird man crush on Putin. Um, Cheryl Waitley, I love the way ATP Geopolitics is able to break down logically and the things I know intuitively. Yeah, so part of that is that Johnny, and Johnny, if you're still here, you can probably weigh into this, uh, is a philosopher. And so his mind's been trained to think a particular way. And so that's what he brings to the table. And so he sees certain things that somebody else might not see. And so, he can't necessarily say like military tactics in a way that somebody who is like combat veteran reacts is going to say, but he will see certain things because of his training. And that's the value that he brings to the table. Okay. Richie, Steve Osborne, you're correct. Thanks for clearing that up about MiGs, Pavlin, Bavliv. However, the Romanian people don't hate Russia because it's because of Russia that Romania got liberated from the Turks. Yeah, that's not exactly right. Like maybe I'm speaking out of school, but the Romanians that I know are ardently like people here in the U.S. ardently defend Ukraine because they recognize what the Soviet system was like, and they don't want to see that spread even in the form of Russia. Okay, greetings from Germany. Your program is awesome. Thank you, Vlad. Shirley, actually, we know Poland used to hate Ukrainians, but they don't hold a grudge with them. As the majority of Polish say that that's in the past. I want to see more debate between pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian channels. I don't think they want to debate. Honestly, I mean, I don't think that they would be at all interested in that. They would have a hard time defending some of their positions. I was on some podcasts early on where there were people that were like pro-Russian about the invasion. Like, well, what would the U.S. do if Canada was like that? Well, not invade. There's a difference between invading and like wooing them back. And so, but we fundamentally think differently in a Western democracy about this than you think if you're a strongman authoritarian that has been in the Soviet system or a Tsar kind of system for many years. And so I think that's part of the difference. Surely, I'm afraid that Tammy G is obviously a troll. So okay, okay, I just won't. Let me keep going on. What so if you're putting stuff into Russian, I don't speak Russian, so I have to skip that comment just because I can't speak it. I think the U.S. is having some trouble understanding a war without air superiority. I think we should send A-10s. Those warthogs, is that what it is? So air superiority is a real issue here, but one of the lessons here is that Russia's military is terribly weak compared to what we thought it was, and they've had a terrible time getting combat. What do you call it? Not combat arms. Collective action. Not collective action. I'm using the wrong term. I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not a military guy. Air, sea, land, all coordinated. Tanks and infantry and whatever else. Getting them all to work together. Combat. I can't remember the term. There's a term, combined arms warfare. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Combined arms. They're having a terrible time getting that sorted out, and that has helped Ukraine survive. So, but Ukraine's been trying to figure this out, and with Western support, I think they're going to have a good time with working these things together. And the Russians are going to have a hard time with that as we move forward. I believe that that's the case. Okay. Plavam Romanians aren't. I'm not going to talk about Romanians. I just really don't know enough about to be able to. Well, okay. Actually, you said something interesting here. I've been to Romania, Transylvania. I've been all the way over to right over across from Moldova. I'm trying to remember the name of the city. I stepped my foot into the river and got my shoe stuck because I was kind of an idiot. Just to say I had stepped into the river. Okay. But you said Romanians aren't exactly happy to go to war with Russia, same as us Bulgarians. I've been to Bulgaria as well, Sofia, Bulgaria, and I'm speaking about the vast majority of the population. Yeah, we don't want war. We want to prevent it from spreading. Steve Osborne, yes, I've encountered them on Mercado Media. They call me a liar about Wagner committing war crimes. Is not just a troll, though different views. He is writing in Bulgarian. I translated it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't anything Cyrillic, whatever it is. I don't understand. That was one of the differences between Bulgaria and Romania. At least seeing language I couldn't understand in Romania, I know enough Latin that I could see some things, but Cyrillic, I'm blind. What's up with Macron? Seems to have changed his position weekly. That's another video that I want to do. Tell me if you think that you'd like to see. So Macron and Putin did some little fireside chat. I haven't seen it yet, but I was thinking about doing a reaction video to it. I don't know if it'll be of value. If you think that's of value, let me know. Fox Sparrow, did you hear that Peter the Great battleship is going to be scrapped? I did not. But whatever battleships they decide to put into the Black Sea just might be. Like Ukraine, I did this video like 6 months ago. Ukraine's like 4-0, and they have no navy to speak of. They shot down, or they sunk the Moskva, and then a number of little boats and they have no navy of their own. Tony Wilson, are you already have it? Does either side have air superiority? One thing that's proven: S-300 and S-400 are good at shooting down aircraft. They also got Patriot missile batteries just recently, this last week. Oris Zub is valuable for his insight in the entire surrounding region. Yeah, absolutely. I've interviewed Oris twice, and he is great, and he does just absolutely amazing filming. Yes, please do that video on Macron. Well, maybe I might. You're up for a Macron video too, Yuri. Stephen Sipe, the U.S. did not mismanage. VP Cheney wanted a neo-colonial governance in Iraq. So, okay, so maybe I'm missing something, Stephen. You could be right. Neo-colonial governance in Iraq, so negotiations would be centralized. I wanted to break up insurance supporting the U.S. Yeah, I don't see what you saw, Stephen. So, I'm going to defer to you on that. But it's so. Let me say it like this: it is tough to manage something like this to begin with, and then there's cultural layers that we're missing. Just like I missed this. So this is a perfect example. This is why these things are so tricky. I didn't have the insight that Stephen had. How much insight did the people that were running it have that they were still missing about the cultural layer of the people that were living there? So that's why it's already so difficult before you even get to a place where you can do it well or not do it well. So, okay. And Stephen, what year did you graduate from UHS? I'm curious if you did. Shirley, how did you get into doing Ukrainian videos? Okay, so my path was the war broke out. A week before the war breaks out, this is a good question. A week before the war breaks out, I'm sitting in the cafeteria at school with my professor colleagues, and we're talking at lunch about like Putin saber rattling. He's not actually going to do it. I go to a conference to present a paper in Myrtle Beach, and while I'm there, that's when the invasion hit. And I'm at breakfast with my colleagues there, and saying like, did he really do that? What happened? A day or two later, I hear Zelensky say, "I need ammunition, not a ride." I'm like, whoa, who is this guy? Now I study leadership. Like leadership studies is my field. I designed a master's in leadership. I designed a minor. I'm right now working out the end of a bachelor's in leadership. So this is my field. And I heard that and I was like, I've got to know everything I can about this guy. And I remember him from the Trump impeachment, like the president from Ukraine, but I didn't know much about him. So in the next 3 weeks, including my spring break, I spent that whole time researching, and then wrote an ebook about Zelensky. It's on Amazon. It's free if you have Amazon Prime. So I wrote that ebook, and then I updated it for the next like 4 or 5 months up through Servodanesk and Lucichance. And along the way, I'm thinking like, got to be doing more. Like this isn't having much of an effect. So about day 85, I started putting out videos on YouTube because I was already updating the ebook anyway. And then I just totally shifted gears to YouTube and just went down that path because I'm trying to help people understand this. And it was crushing to watch like the news cycle just totally forget about Ukraine. And the only place that you can really get consistent information about Ukraine is on YouTube. Okay, at any rate, that was my journey. Wow, a lot of questions came up since then. Macron got slapped yesterday and an egg in the face the day before that. Last week, the French revolutionaries burned down his favorite bagel shop. That's tragic. Bagels shouldn't be involved in this conflagration. Bogut says on the Macron video, he flip-flops so much as hard to see which side he's on. That's per usual. Steve says the difference in opinion is one thing, but just denying facts is a troll. Yeah, okay, I can see that. A troll said to me yesterday, day before yesterday, fake professor, where are your lies today? Which I thought was kind of fun. I told my class about the fake professor thing, and they had a good laugh about that because they had their exams are next week. So, all right, Tony Wilson, don't support rats. Neither side is having air superiority is a better argument for sending A-10s because air-to-ground usage. So those are warthogs, A-10s, right? Steve Osborne, yes, it's true. Has to do with Plavum. That's not credible information. He's French, comes with the territory. Okay, I'm not sure because you guys are talking at each other, not at me. So I'm not sure what exactly to answer. So, okay. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is try to wrap up with the weekly events I got from Saturday to Sunday. Zelensky calls on last Saturday for security guarantees. We have more about the leaked intel documents. That's when Radio Free Europe also reported that Wagner boss says to wind down the war, but that's not what happened. We also had a Donbass-Devushka break with the Wall Street Journal on that day, but I didn't see that on that day. It was just it wasn't in my feed of things, and I missed it. But then Jake pointed this out a day or two later. Mirza jailed for 25 years for high treason for criticizing Kremlin policies. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Leaks showed that Russia is honing disinformation. False accounts that were detected only 1% of the time. That's pretty sad. Slovakia on Monday handed over 13 MiGs, and there was more about the Donbass-Devushka that broke that day. Tuesday, Putin prepares for whatever tools he has left, and they're talking about nuclear. I don't think he's going to use nuclear, but he's using whatever kind of information war that he can. And that's really, information war is a legitimate component of this war, and it's going to amplify more and more. Zelensky rallies the troops in Advinka. And this was really interesting. When he was doing that, that's when the Kremlin put out that Putin was visiting Kherson and Luhansk. When he was in Kherson, he was 130. Go back to my video about this. Not the Chicken Hawk video, but the one before. Yeah, the Chicken Hawk video. He was 130 kilometers from the front lines while Zelensky's in Advinka. And just the contrast between the way these two guys functioned was just unreal. Please go back and watch the Why Lie About Stupid stuff, and then the Chicken Hawk one before the other, and just it's just amazing. Okay, Ukraine could be looking at another Maidan, according to Political. I don't think so, but it was an interesting article that was talking about like every 10 years or so, 2004, 2014, maybe again in 2024. Now, it could be that they treat Zelensky like they treated Churchill after World War II and turn him out. I don't know, but I'm not sure that I would argue that that's going to be a thing. 2 Russian Wagner commanders, this is on Tuesday, admitted to killing children as part of that, and I talked about that earlier. Wednesday, more pressure on Bakhmut. Leaks about China and Russia are coming out from the leaks, and like China was originally like thinking about supplying some weapons marked as not weapons, and then they severely backed off of that. Patriot missile systems arrived. Flash over the sky in Ukraine. It looks like it was a meteor, maybe. That's what we think. Originally, they were wondering. Like, I'd be worried too if I was in there. On Wednesday, the Ukrainian prosecutor said 80,000 cases of war crimes were documented in Ukraine so far. The EU joins the EU Civil Protection Mechanism as well on Wednesday. Thursday, Stoltenberg visits Ukraine. Pravda was giving reasons that Russia has invaded Ukraine. Guess what? They're NATO. They're going to join NATO, and Russians are being persecuted. The Russians are being persecuted trope. That's what Hitler used to invade Poland. That Germans were being oppressed by the Poles, and it was all a setup. Counteroffensive will be coming soon. We know that. Ukraine's corn and wheat supply is to drop drastically, and that's as these other nations are not like allowing their food in. On Friday, all NATO members have agreed that Ukraine will join NATO after the war. Like all nations have, NATO nations have agreed to this already, and that's pretty impressive. But you got to get past the war. Now, by the way, I talked about how RT said, well, they're about to join NATO. They couldn't join NATO. They're lying. Here's how we know that they're lying. You can't join NATO when there's an active conflict on your territory, and Russia has been there since 2014. Nothing changed since then. There was no way that they could have done it. So, okay, at any rate, Ramstein focuses on air defense, which is most urgent. And the U.S. military is good about identifying the needs and trying to supply them with the right weapons for that need. So if they're not supplying this, but they're supplying that, there's a reason for why they're supplying this and not that. Okay, and then RFK Jr. is on Tucker Carlson parroting the 7-to-1 figure that was, it looks like Donbass Davushka or somebody like that changed, and then it was picked up by Scott Ritter and the judge, and it was picked up by Tucker, and it was picked up by RFK Jr. running for president as a Democrat, saying the 7-1 figure and we shouldn't be in Ukraine. Okay, so that's a quick rundown of the week's events. Let me answer last questions and then we'll be done. Tony Wilson, don't support rats, says F-16s or X-1s would be shot down, saying that something might be destroyed in this war. Okay, are there questions for me here? Surely look at old documents. I don't think so. Stephen Sipe, I wanted to Iraq to have a state with a Kurd majority. That would have been perhaps optimal. Sunni minorities, 3 Shia majorities, Baghdad and Basra. Yeah, and that probably would have been a good plan, Stephen. If you don't know how it began, you can't understand why it's happening now. Should America allow Ukraine to use its weapons in Russia? So that's really, Stacy, thank you. You're asking me a good question. And so 74, Stephen? 74. Wow. Okay. So you're before my time in 91. So, but so you've seen Union change quite a bit. Okay. At any rate, so should America allow Ukraine to use its weapons in Russia? So the short answer is that what they have tried desperately not to do is let the war expand. And one of the ways that the war would expand most quickly is if they allow Ukraine to attack into Russia. I think they've allowed some small things like into Belgorod or other places where they can strike at something that's a present threat, but to like hit Moscow would expand and perhaps change the narrative. Because right now, Ukraine's clearly the victim, but the Russian narrative would change, and that could bring in other entities to Russian side, and we really don't want to do that. We also don't want it to expand in any way. And so I think the U.S. government is, I don't know this. This is my speculation. And so I'm clarifying because what I've read seems to indicate that the behind the scenes U.S. government officials are telling Ukraine, you may not use this stuff to attack this, to do that, to go to hit Russia. Like, okay, so but Crimea is not Russia, and they're fine with that, and they don't want to perhaps trip off a nuclear war in the process as well. So. Yeah, at any rate, I think that's probably a fair understanding of how that works. Okay. Great question, Stacy. Stacy Bashford, they're looking for Belgorod, Kursk, and they're using weapons. They just can't do much actual damage, so they resort to terrorist attacks. Terrorist attacks? I would hardly call attacking somebody who is running roughshod over your own country as a terrorist attack in response. Like the bridge, that's not a terrorist attack, but Putin called it a terrorist attack, which that's not the definition of a terrorist attack. Okay, Robert Plant, do you do this same way every week? What time? Thank you again. So I'm still trying to figure out what time frame works. I try to do it on Saturday just because it seems like doing a Q&A actually works well to kind of cap the week and kind of overview things. And then I try to I changed my format from trying to cover everything during the day to I took Anders Puck Nielsen graciously gave me some advice uh, about like, hey, how can I do this better? And he told me about some camera things and said, look, focus on one thing. You sing your high notes. Focus on doing just one thing and speaking well to it and covering the subject rather than trying to do everything. You'll never be able to compete with the news. And it was good advice. So I've shifted gears and I think it's been helpful. Okay, at any rate, thank you, guys. I really appreciate your interest and your feedback. I'm really toying with doing one of these with Twitter and crowdsourcing a group of Twitter sites that you guys use. So if you bookmark them, I will shortly give you put out a crowdsourced link so that you can put these in, and then we can put them into a spreadsheet and then see what we think, and we can talk about them here. So that's pretty much it. Okay, one last question. So according to Russia, so according to you, Russia can do what it wants because it has nukes. Wow. So that's a rough way of saying that. So not that it can do what it wants, but it has deterred the U.S. and the West far better than the West has deterred it. But it is they do have nukes, and they have used that to great effect. Not that they can do what they want; they need to be stopped. But we want to keep it as a conventional war, not a nuclear war. And yeah, and so that's the hard reality of the way that it's gone, and it pains me to even articulate that. But that's a fair understanding of how that's gone. Um, and surely, I know you were talking to Flamen or whatever his name is, but that is actually kind of how that's transpired. Okay. Cheryl, last thing, said, love the parallel between Germany's excuse for invading Poland and Russia's excuse for invading Ukraine. That's exactly what's happened. In fact, I got a lot of heat, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. I got a lot of heat when the war first began. I put on Facebook that image, and you've seen it on Jake Bro now. You've seen it on Anna did this, but it was an image of Putin on a train, and there's a reflection of Putin and Hitler in the like Putin sitting on a train, and you see the reflection of Hitler's face. I said, I think this is right. No, he's not the same. You can't say that. And people would push back. I'm like, yes, I can say that. One. And two, I know he's not the same. I did my master's thesis on the Third Reich. I know what I'm talking about here, right? They're not the same, and they're not Nazi in that sense. They are authoritarians, and they're using the same playbook. So at any rate, okay, I'm done with that. Thank you guys for your time and attention, and thank you for caring about Ukraine.